The mop hit the floor with a wet slap, echoing through the empty corridor of Naval Air Station Oceana. Commander Vera Haverson, though nobody here knew that title anymore, pushed the bucket forward with practiced efficiency, her calloused hands gripping the handle like she once gripped a control stick at Mach 2. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across her face, lines etched deeper than her 41 years should have allowed. She wore the same faded blue maintenance uniform as every other custodian on base, her name tag deliberately turned inward against her chest. At 5:30 hours, the hallway belonged to her alone, just linoleum, bleach fumes, and the ghosts of a life she'd walked away from. Or rather, a life that had walked away from her. "Hey, cleaning lady." The voice shattered the silence like a missile through cloud cover. Vera didn't look up. 3 junior officers stumbled past, still drunk from whatever off-base bar had tolerated them until closing. Their khaki uniforms were crisp, their wings polished, their arrogant standard issue. "You missed a spot," one of them laughed, deliberately kicking over her bucket. Dirty water spread across the floor she'd just finished, a gray tide carrying cigarette butts and shame. They didn't wait for a response. Why would they? To them, she was invisible, just another sad story in a blue jumpsuit, probably working 2 jobs, probably behind on rent, probably nobody. If only they knew. Vera knelt slowly, her right knee protesting, the one that never quite healed right after the ejection. She began mopping again, methodical, therapeutic almost. The motion carried muscle memory from a different life. Pre-flight checks, weapons systems diagnostics, the careful precision required when your mistakes are measured in lives lost. Outside the windows, the first hint of dawn touched the flight line. She could see them clearly. FA-18 Super Hornets lined up like sleeping predators, their gray surfaces drinking in the soft light. Her chest tightened. She'd flown the earlier models, back when her call sign meant something. Back when Reaper struck fear instead of pity. The base was waking up now. She could hear it in the distant rumble of auxiliary power units spinning up, the metallic clang of hangar doors, the rapid-fire cadence of boots on concrete. Somewhere out there, pilots were suiting up, receiving briefings, living the life she'd bled for. And here she was, erasing their footprints from polished floors. The injustice of it should have hurt more. Maybe she'd just run out of feeling. Or maybe, and this scared her more, she'd accepted that this was penance for crimes no court-martial had ever charged her with. Her radio crackled. "Vera, you copy. Need you in Hangar 7 when you're done with that wing." She keyed the response button. "Roger, 10 minutes. Just another ghost in the machine." Hangar 7 squatted at the far end of the flight line, its massive doors sealed shut against the emerging daylight. Vera pushed her cart across the tarmac, wheels rattling over expansion joints, her shadow stretching long and thin behind her. The air smelled of jet fuel and ocean salt, a combination that had once made her heart race with anticipation. Now it just reminded her of everything she'd lost. The hangar's side entrance required a security code, one that changed weekly, except she still knew it. Muscle memory again, or maybe just the universe's cruel joke. She punched in the numbers and stepped into the cavernous space. The F-35 Sea Lightning II dominated the center of the hangar like a technological deity. Even in the dim emergency lighting, its stealth angles and sensor arrays radiated lethal capability. Vera stopped, transfixed. She'd never flown one. They'd come online after her time, but the language was universal. The slight upturn of the wing edges, the serpentine curve of the air intakes, the way it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. This was art masquerading as weaponry, or maybe weaponry that had transcended into art. Either way, it was beautiful. "Don't touch anything." The voice belonged to Lieutenant Marcus Webb, a maintenance officer with a clipboard and an attitude. He looked at her the way people looked at stray dogs, vague concern mixed with distrust. "Just need the floors done. Aircraft's prepped for a VIP inspection at 800. Admiral's coming through." Vera nodded, pulling out her mop. She worked in wide arcs, staying clear of the aircraft, eyes down in practiced subservience. But she was watching. The weapon's loadout was wrong. Whoever had done the pre-flight had mounted AIM-120 AMRAAMs on the outer pylons instead of the inner. Basic tactical error. The outer stations should carry AIM-9X sidewinders for their superior off-boresight capability in close engagements. The AMRAAMs belonged inside, where their radar signatures mattered less. She said nothing. It wasn't her place anymore. "Yo, Webb," another officer jogged in, boots echoing like gunshots. "Admiral's ETA moved up. He's landing in 15. We need everyone out of here for the security sweep." Webb cursed, checking his watch. "All right, cleaning lady, time's up, clear out." Vera gathered her supplies without complaint, but her eyes lingered on the weapon's configuration. Whoever was flying this bird was either going into an exercise with the wrong setup, or worse, someone had signed off on a combat load they didn't understand. Not her problem. Not anymore. She'd learned the hard way that speaking up only brought pain. The hallway outside Hangar 7 was filling with personnel now, a river of uniforms flowing toward the VIP arrival area. Vera merged with the current, invisible as always, pushing her cart toward the maintenance building. The base's morning energy was palpable, controlled chaos, purposeful movement, the kinetic hum of military readiness. She used to be part of that hum, used to add her own frequency to the collective mission. Now she was just static. In the custodial office, she found her supervisor, Danny Reeves, a retired Navy chief with kind eyes and a voice roughened by 30 years of cigarettes. He was one of 3 people on this base who knew her real story, and the only one who'd offered her this job when she'd showed up 6 months ago, desperate and broken. "Big day," he said, not looking up from his coffee. "Admiral Kincaid himself. Heard he's presenting some award, checking on the new F-35 squadron. Whole dog-end pony show." Vera's hand froze on her locker. "Kincaid." "Yeah, the SEAL Admiral. Hellion One himself, you know him." She knew him, knew the tactical call sign before he'd climbed the brass ladder, knew the mission that had made him a legend and destroyed her career in the same terrible night. Her mouth went dry. Just heard the stories. Danny studied her with those perceptive eyes that had seen too much life to be fooled easily. "You gonna be okay." "Always am." The lie came easily now, smooth as her old aircraft's skin slicing through stratosphere. She closed her locker and grabbed a fresh trash bag. "Got the ready rooms to clean." The ready room for VFA 147, the Argonauts, was empty when she arrived. Coffee cups ringed with dried stains littered the tables. Flight suits hung on pegs like shed skins. The walls were covered with patches, photos, mission boards, the visual language of naval aviation. She moved through the space mechanically, emptying trash, wiping surfaces, trying not to read the names on the personal lockers. Trying not to remember when she'd had her own locker, her own call sign stenciled in aggressive letters, her own seat at the briefing table where life and death decisions were made with clinical precision. A photo caught her eye, pinned to the cork board, slightly faded. An FA-18E Super Hornet banking hard right, sun glinting off its canopy, vapor trails streaming from the wingtips. The angle was perfect, the composition almost artistic. Below it, someone had written, "What real flying looks like." She recognized the aircraft number. That was her bird, her Hornet, from the mission. Her hands trembled as she reached for the photo, then stopped. Don't touch it, don't acknowledge it, that life is dead." "Pretty sick shot, right?" A young pilot entered, flight suit unzipped to his waist, call sign Deuce embroidered on his chest. He couldn't have been more than 26, his face still holding that invincible gleam that wouldn't survive his first real combat. "That's from Operation Phantom Reach. My instructor at flight school flew that mission. Said it was the most balls-to-the-wall air support run he'd ever witnessed. Pilot was some woman, actually. Reaper, they called her." Vera's voice came out steadier than she felt. "What happened to her?" Deuce shrugged, grabbing his helmet. "Dunno, heard she got screwed over somehow, politics or something. Brass always eating their own." He glanced at her, really seeing her for the first time, and his expression shifted into polite dismissal. Thanks for keeping the place clean." Then he was gone, leaving her alone with the ghost of her former self frozen in photographic amber. The morning accelerated into controlled pandemonium. By 7:45, the entire base seemed to be converging on the flight line. Vera was assigned to the observation deck maintenance, basically standing by with a mop in case some dignitary spilled their coffee. She watched from the shadows as the Admiral's helicopter approached, a Sea Hawk cutting through the morning sky with predatory grace. It touched down with barely a shudder, rotor wash whipping flags into horizontal fury. Admiral Jacob Kincaid emerged like a force of nature. Even from this distance, Vera could see the presence that had made him legendary. 6'2", shoulders that could carry the weight of impossible missions, a face carved from granite and consequence. His uniform was covered with ribbons, multiple silver stars, a Navy cross, decorations from allied nations. But it was his eyes that people remembered. Eyes that had seen things no human should see, and had somehow remained sane enough to lead others into similar darkness. The base commander greeted him with a salute so crisp it could cut glass. They exchanged words Vera couldn't hear, then moved toward the hangar where the F-35 waited. The entourage followed, officers, aides, photographers capturing every moment for posterity. Vera pressed herself against the wall, becoming negative space, a hole in the air where a person used to be. "All custodial personnel clear the flight line," a voice barked over the PA system. "Repeat, all non-essential personnel clear the flight line immediately." Non-essential. The word hit like a punch. Once, she'd been essential. Once, her decisions had protected ground forces from annihilation. Once, an admiral had shaken her hand and called her the finest combat pilot he'd served with. That admiral had been Jacob Kincaid, and that was before she disobeyed his direct order and saved his life. Some rewards came wrapped in court-martial threats and forced resignation papers. She turned to leave, to disappear back into the building's bowels where people like her belonged, when the explosion shattered the morning calm. Not a large explosion, a sharp crack followed by billowing smoke from Hangar 7. Alarms screamed to life. Personnel scattered in trained chaos, some running toward the emergency, others executing evacuation protocols. Vera's body moved on instinct, pulling the fire extinguisher from the wall mount, sprinting toward the smoke before her conscious mind had even registered the decision. The hangar's interior was hazy with chemical smoke, the fire suppression system dumping foam across the F-35. But Vera's trained eyes cut through the chaos immediately. This wasn't a fire. The smoke was coming from a hydraulic line that had ruptured, spraying fluid across hot engine components. Dangerous, yes. Catastrophic, not yet. But if that fluid reached the right temperature, if it found an ignition source, the entire aircraft, with its full weapons load, would become a fireball that could level half the hangar. "Everyone out," someone was screaming. "Evacuate now." But the Admiral was still in there along with two junior officers, frozen in the confusion of an emergency that wasn't in any briefing book. Vera didn't hesitate. She ran toward the F-35, eyes scanning, brain processing at the speed she'd trained for years to achieve. The hydraulic line rupture was at the landing gear bay, reachable, but only if someone knew exactly where to find the emergency shutoff valve. Most maintainers wouldn't know. Most pilots wouldn't know. But Vera knew. She'd memorized every system on every aircraft she'd ever touched because her survival had once depended on that knowledge. She slid under the fuselage, ignoring the spraying hydraulic fluid that soaked her uniform and made the floor slick as ice. Her fingers found the panel access, popped it, located the valve. It was stuck, corroded, or over-torqued, she couldn't tell. She gripped it with both hands, pulled with everything she had. Her right shoulder, the one that had taken the ejection damage, screamed in protest. The valve didn't move. "Get out of there!" A hand grabbed her ankle. She kicked it away reflexively, combat training overriding civilian restraint. The hand released. The valve budged, a quarter turn, half. Vera grunted, pulled, felt something tear in her shoulder, didn't care. 3/4, the hydraulic spray weakened. Full turn, the fluid stopped. The immediate danger was neutralized. She crawled out from under the aircraft, her uniform drenched, her shoulder on fire, her heart pounding with an adrenaline cocktail she hadn't felt in months. The hangar was clearing, security forces were establishing a perimeter, and standing directly in front of her, looking down with an expression she couldn't quite read, was Admiral Jacob Kincaid. Their eyes met. His widened fractionally. Recognition flickered across his face like lightning through storm clouds. "Vera," his voice was barely a whisper, the kind of whisper that carries more weight than a shout. "Vera Haverson." She stood slowly, painfully, unable to meet his gaze for more than a second. Her voice came out hoarse, defeated. "Sir." The word hung in the air between them, loaded with 1,000 unspoken conversations, 3 years of silence, and one mission that had changed both their lives irrevocably. Around them, the chaos continued. Firefighters moving in, officers establishing control, the mechanical dance of emergency response. But in that moment, in that small pocket of shared history, time bent. Kincaid's jaw tightened. "What the hell are you doing here?" "Mopping floors, sir. No sarcasm, just fact. It's my job now." His face did something complicated, anger, grief, guilt, rage, all flickering too fast to catalog. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Before he could speak, the base commander rushed over, face flushed with the exertion of command under crisis. "Admiral, we need to get you clear. The area isn't secure." "This woman just saved that aircraft and possibly several lives," Kincaid said, his voice carrying the unmistakable tone of command that made admirals. "Including mine, again." The emphasis on that last word was deliberate. The base commander looked confused, glancing between Kincaid and Vera as if trying to reconcile the admiral's words with the soaked custodian standing before them. "Sir, this is just one of our maintenance staff. I'm sure she was just." "This is Commander Vera Haverson," Kincaid interrupted, and the title fell like a bomb. "Naval aviator, call sign Reaper, 600 combat hours, 3 distinguished flying crosses, and the finest goddamn pilot I've ever had the privilege to fly with." The base commander's expression cycled through disbelief, shock, and finally, something approaching horror. Around them, officers and enlisted personnel who'd been filtering back into the area after the all-clear froze. Vera wanted to disappear, wanted to melt into the floor she'd been mopping an hour ago, wanted anything except to be the center of this attention, this scrutiny, this resurrection of a past she'd buried under 6 months of invisible labor. "Sir," she said quietly, "with respect, that's not necessary. I just did what anyone would have." "Bullshit." Kincaid's voice was sharp enough to cut titanium. "Half the people here would have run. The other half wouldn't have known where that shut-off valve was. You moved like you still had your wings." His voice softened fractionally. "Why are you here, Vera? Why are you cleaning floors when you should be in a cockpit?" The question was too big, too complex, too weighted with shame and anger and loss. Vera's throat closed. How could she explain? How could she tell him that after she disobeyed his direct order, after she'd broken formation and vectored back to provide close air support for his pinned-down SEAL team, when he'd explicitly told her to return to base, after she'd expended every weapon she had and made gun runs so low her aircraft had taken ground fire, after all that, after she'd saved 16 men including the man standing in front of her, the Navy had given her a choice. Resign quietly or face a court-martial for insubordination. How could she tell him that she'd chosen resignation because a trial would have exposed the fact that he'd called off the air support too early, that his risk calculus had been wrong, that she'd known it and acted anyway, that she'd protected his career at the cost of her own? She couldn't, so she just said, "Things changed, sir." Kincaid stared at her and she saw him processing, remembering, connecting dots he'd probably wondered about for 3 years. His face hardened into something terrible and beautiful at once, the expression of a man realizing he'd been complicit in an injustice. "Who did this? Who forced you out?" "Sir, this isn't the time," or "Who?" The Admiral's voice was thunder now. The base commander looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on the planet. Other officers were backing away slowly, recognizing the tone of a flag officer who just found a mission. Vera closed her eyes, opened them. "Captain Hendricks. He was my during Phantom Reach. Said I had two choices after the mission. He said you'd submitted paperwork recommending a court-martial for insubordination." The lie had been elegant in its simplicity. Hendricks had shown her the documents, Kincaid's signature at the bottom, the formal language requesting disciplinary action. She'd believed it because why wouldn't she? And she'd resigned because she wouldn't let the man whose life she'd saved watch her get court-martialed for saving him. Kincaid's face went white. "I never submitted any such paperwork. I put you in for a goddamn Medal of Honor." The world tilted. Vera grabbed the F-35's landing gear for support, her wet uniform suddenly freezing against her skin. "What?" "You disobeyed my order because my order was wrong," Kincaid continued, his voice raw with suppressed fury. "I called off the air support because I didn't want to risk pilots for an already failed operation. I was going to lead my team on foot through 15 miles of hostile territory because I'd made a tactical error and I was prepared to own it. But you didn't let me. You came back. You held off 3 enemy positions with nothing but your guns after you'd expended ordnance. You took ground fire. You saved 16 lives." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to something almost gentle. "And I wrote a citation that detailed every act of heroism you performed that night. I was told it was being processed. I was told you'd been transferred to a new assignment. I was told." He stopped, jaw working. "I was told a lot of lies, apparently." The implications were staggering. Vera's mind raced. Hendricks had forged documents, had intercepted Kincaid's actual recommendation, had manufactured an entire disciplinary narrative to cover up. What? His own failure to support the mission. His resentment of a female pilot who'd outperformed his expectations. The politics of naval aviation that still, despite decades of progress, didn't always welcome women who were better than men. "Where is Captain Hendricks now?" Kincaid asked, his voice deadly calm. The base commander, sensing his role in this unfolding drama, stepped forward cautiously. "Admiral, Captain Hendricks retired last year. Medical discharge, sir. If there's been some kind of administrative error, we can certainly—" "Administrative error," Kincaid's laugh was bitter. "This woman lost her career because someone buried a Medal of Honor recommendation and forged documents in my name. That's not an administrative error, that's a criminal conspiracy." He turned back to Vera and his expression softened into something that looked like pain. "Vera, I'm sorry. I'm so goddamn sorry. I should have followed up, should have checked on you, should have known something was wrong when you just disappeared." Vera's legs felt weak. 6 months of mopping floors, of being invisible, of accepting that her sacrifice had been her penance, all of it was crumbling. "I thought you wanted me gone," she whispered. "I thought saving your life cost me mine, and I thought that was the deal." There was no deal. There should never have been a deal. Kincaid looked around at the assembled personnel, his admiral's mask sliding back into place. "Someone get Commander Haverson to medical. That shoulder needs attention. Then I want her service record pulled. I want every document related to Operation Phantom Reach on my desk within the hour. And I want someone to find out if Hendricks had any accomplices because this level of fraud doesn't happen in a vacuum." People moved. The military's response to clear orders was immediate and efficient, but Vera stayed rooted, overwhelmed by the sudden shift in her reality's axis. "Sir, I haven't been a commander for 3 years. I'm not even in the Navy anymore." Kincaid's smile was sharp and predatory. "We'll see about that." The base medical facility was too bright, too clean, too full of concerned faces asking questions Vera couldn't quite process. Her shoulder was examined, x-rayed, diagnosed with a torn rotator cuff that would need surgery. She'd done the damage shutting off that hydraulic valve, but the foundation had been laid years ago during her ejection. The flight surgeon, a competent woman named Rodriguez, looked at the old imaging in Vieira's incomplete medical file and frowned. "This should have been fixed back then," Rodriguez said. "Looks like it was initially treated, but whoever did your follow-up care didn't recommend the surgery you actually needed. Did you have trouble getting clearance for treatment?" Vieira remembered Hendricks telling her the Navy wouldn't approve the surgery because she was being administratively separated. Remembered being told to seek civilian care after her transition. Remembered not having insurance for the first 4 months, and by then the pain had become just another thing she lived with. Another casualty of her career's execution. "It was complicated," Vieira said. Rodriguez's expression suggested she understood exactly how complicated military medicine could become when careers were being buried. "Well, we'll get you fixed up now. I'm putting you on light duty until we can schedule the procedure." "I'm not on duty. I'm a civilian contractor." "Not according to Admiral Kincaid. He's already initiated paperwork to recall you to active status. Some kind of administrative remedy process I've never seen used before." Rodriguez smiled. "You must have impressed him." Impressed him. The phrase felt absurd. She disobeyed him, saved him, and been destroyed for it. And now, through some twist of fate and a hydraulic line rupture, the truth was surfacing like a submarine breaching through ice. Vieira didn't know whether to feel vindicated or terrified. Maybe both. She was still in the medical facility, arm in a sling, when Kincaid returned 4 hours later. He carried a thick folder and wore the expression of a man who'd been waging war in carpeted offices. He sat across from her in the small consultation room, placed the folder on the table between them and said, "It's worse than I thought." "How bad?" Hendricks didn't just bury one recommendation. He systematically blocked your advancement for 2 years before Phantom Reach. Every fitness report you submitted got modified. Every commendation got downgraded. He was building a paper trail that made you look mediocre at best, insubordinate at worst. Kincaid opened the folder, showing her documents she'd never seen. Your original performance reviews were glowing. Squadron commanders loved you. But Hendricks had administrative oversight, and he used it to rewrite your career. Vieira stared at the papers, at words she'd supposedly written criticizing her own performance, at fitness reports claiming she had attitude problems and struggled with authority. None of it was real. All of it had shaped her life. Why? "I talked to 3 officers who served with you both. Off the record, they said Hendricks made comments about female pilots being a diversity checkbox, about how women couldn't handle the psychological pressure of combat aviation, about how he'd prove it eventually." Kincaid's voice was ice. "You were his proof, except you weren't. You were the best pilot in the squadron, so he manufactured evidence to support his bias." The rage should have come hot and fast, but Vieira felt cold instead. Numb. She'd lost 3 years to a lie. 3 years of mopping floors and being invisible while the sky called to her in dreams. 3 years of believing she deserved her punishment, that her moment of disobedience, even though it had saved lives, had rightfully ended her career. All because one man couldn't accept that a woman might be exceptional at a job he considered masculine territory. "What happens now?" she asked. Kincaid leaned back, his expression hardening into command mode. Now I make this right. Your Medal of Honor recommendation is being resubmitted today with a formal investigation into why it was buried. Your service record is being corrected. You're being recalled to active duty at your proper rank with full back pay. And Hendricks, retired or not, is going to face a formal inquiry that could result in criminal charges. He doesn't get to walk away from this. It was too much, too fast. Vieira's world had been small and dark for so long, and suddenly someone was throwing open blast doors, flooding everything with light. She should have felt elated. Instead, she felt exposed. "I don't know if I can do it anymore," she whispered. It's been 3 years, and my shoulder." "Rodriguez says with surgery you'll be cleared for duty in 4 to 6 months. That's time enough to retrain to get current again, if that's what you want. Kincaid's voice softened. Vera, I'm not ordering you back into a cockpit. I'm giving you the choice that was taken from you. If you want to walk away, really walk away, that's your right. But you should walk away as a commander with a Medal of Honor, not as a janitor who got screwed over by a bitter captain. The choice. After 3 years of having no choices, of drifting through days like smoke through ventilation, someone was offering her agency again. Vera looked down at her hands, calloused from mops, scarred from ejections, still capable of things most people couldn't imagine. Could she fly again? Could she sit in a cockpit, strap in, push the throttle forward and trust herself with millions of dollars of aircraft and the mission's weight on her shoulders? She remembered the photo in the ready room. What real flying looks like. That had been her. That pilot banking hard right with the sun on her canopy, that was who she'd been. Maybe who she still was under the layers of resignation and loss. I want my wings back, she said quietly. Then stronger, I want to fly again. Kincaid smiled, and it transformed his face into something younger, more hopeful. Then let's get you back in the air. The news spread through the base like wildfire through jet fuel. By evening, everyone knew that the cleaning lady was actually a commander, that Admiral Kincaid had personally intervened, that there was an investigation, that someone was going to pay for what had happened. Vera became an instant legend, but not the kind she wanted to be. She preferred the anonymity of excellence, not the spotlight of victimhood. She returned to the custodial office one last time to collect her few personal items. Danny was there, coffee cup in hand, knowing smile on his face. Knew you were too good at this job, he said. Nobody who can strip and wax a floor that perfectly learned it from a training manual. You had discipline, military discipline. You never said anything. Wasn't my place. Figured you'd tell me when you were ready or you wouldn't. Everyone's running from something. Didn't matter to me what you were running from, long as you showed up on time and did the work. He paused. But I'm glad you're done running. Vera hugged him, this kind man who'd given her a job when she'd had nothing. Thank you, Danny, for everything. Just promise me something, he said. When you're back up there doing whatever it is you fighter jocks do, remember us down here. The people who keep the floors clean and the toilets working and the coffee hot. We're part of the mission too. Always, she promised. Lieutenant Deuce found her in the hallway outside the ready room. The young pilot looked uncomfortable, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by something approaching shame. Commander Haverson, can I talk to you for a minute? Vera nodded, curious. I'm sorry, he said in a rush. For being a dick, I just thought you were. I didn't know. He stopped, took a breath. That photo in the ready room, that's you, you're Reaper. I was Reaper, don't know what I am now. You're a goddamn legend, ma'am. My flight instructor, Lieutenant Vasquez, he was on the ground during Phantom Reach. He was one of the guys you saved. He told us the story, but he never mentioned you were a woman, and I just assumed. Deuce's face flushed. I assumed a lot of things I shouldn't have. Vera studied this young pilot, seeing her former self reflected in his earnest expression. You know what the hardest part of being a good pilot is? No, ma'am. It's not the flying. It's recognizing that everyone you encounter, everyone, has skills and stories you know nothing about. The person cleaning your ready room might be a former command pilot. The maintenance tech might be a tactical genius. The weather officer might have saved more lives with a single forecast than you have with your entire career. Respect isn't about rank or job title. It's about recognizing capability wherever it exists. Deuce absorbed this, nodded slowly. I'll remember that, ma'am. See that you do. The next 4 months were a blur of surgery, physical therapy, and administrative warfare. Vera's shoulder was repaired, a complex procedure involving anchors and sutures that left her immobilized for weeks. But Rodriguez had been right. With proper treatment, the joint began functioning again. While her body healed, Kincaid went to war on her behalf. The Medal of Honor recommendation was approved. Hendricks was formally investigated, and the findings were damning enough to strip him of his pension pending a court-martial. 3 other officers who'd been complicit in the records tampering accepted administrative punishment rather than face trial. But the real battle was getting Vera back in the air. The Navy's medical standards were uncompromising, and she'd been out of the cockpit for 3 years. She had to pass every evaluation a new pilot would face, had to prove her reflexes, her judgment, her ability to handle G-forces and stress and the split-second calculus of combat. At 41, she was older than most training officers. Her body carried injuries, but her mind was sharp, and her desire burned hotter than afterburners. She soloed again in an FA-18F on a crystal-clear morning in March. The moment the wheels left the ground, something inside her clicked back into place, a piece of her soul that had been dislocated, suddenly popping back into its socket. The aircraft responded to her touch like it had been waiting, like the 3 years had been just a pause in a conversation that was always meant to continue. She climbed hard, the Virginia coastline falling away beneath her, and for the first time since Phantom Reach, Commander Vera "Reaper" Haverson smiled with pure, uncomplicated joy. Her reinstatement became official in April. She was assigned to VFA 147, the Argonauts, the same squadron whose ready room she'd cleaned. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Her first day back, walking into the ready room in a flight suit instead of a janitor's uniform, the assembled pilots stood and applauded. It was awkward and genuine and overwhelming. Deuce was there, grinning like an idiot. Other pilots she'd never met offered handshakes and welcomes. They'd all heard the story by now. She was the pilot who'd been screwed over and fought her way back. She was Reaper, returned from the dead. But one pilot wasn't smiling. Captain Reed Thompson, the squadron's executive officer, stood off to the side with his arms crossed and his expression skeptical. He was old school, a combat veteran who'd flown missions over Afghanistan and Iraq, and he made his position clear in their first meeting. "I don't care about your story," Thompson said bluntly, alone with her in his office. "I don't care what happened to you. I don't care that Kincaid went a bat for you. What I care about is whether you can still fly at the level this squadron requires. You're 41, you've been out for 3 years, and you're coming off major surgery. That's 3 strikes in my book." Vera met his gaze steadily. "Then let me prove it." "Oh, you'll get your chance. But understand this, I'm not giving you special treatment. You're not a victim here. You're a pilot. You succeed or fail on your merits. Clear?" "Crystal, sir." Thompson's skepticism wasn't entirely unfair, Vera knew. She was a wild card, an unknown quantity, someone whose legend might not match their current capability. The Navy had invested resources in bringing her back, but investment didn't guarantee return. She would have to earn this, every single day in every single flight against pilots who were younger, hungrier, and had never stopped flying. She was ready for that fight. The squadron accepted her gradually, through the universal language of competency. She flew training sorties, weapons qualifications, emergency procedure drills. She proved she could still find a tanker in bad weather, could execute a tactical break at 500 knots, could put ordnance on target from angles that made the younger pilots nervous to even attempt. Her situational awareness was as sharp as ever, that indefinable quality that separated good pilots from exceptional ones. She could track multiple aircraft, process threat data, manage fuel and weapons status, and maintain perfect radio discipline, all while flying at the edge of the performance envelope. By June, even Thompson was grudgingly impressed. "You're slower than you used to be," he admitted after a particularly grueling ACM session. "Your reaction time's off by maybe 1/10 of a second." "Age and rust," Vera agreed. "But your decision-making is better. You don't take unnecessary risks. You set up shots instead of forcing them." He paused. "Honestly, Haverson, you might be a better pilot now than you were 3 years ago, more complete." It was the closest thing to a compliment she'd heard from him, and she treasured it more than all the standing ovations. The deployment orders came in July. VFA-147 was being assigned to Carrier Air Wing 11 aboard the USS Theodore Roosevelt for a 9-month rotation to the Arabian Gulf. It would be Vera's first deployment since Phantom Reach, her first chance to prove she belonged not just in the air but in the operational fight. The mission brief was standard: maintain air superiority, support coalition ground forces, counter regional threats. What wasn't standard was the political situation. Tensions with Iran were escalating. Chinese warships were operating more aggressively in international waters. The world was becoming more dangerous, more unpredictable, and carrier strike groups were the military's answer to that uncertainty. Vera packed her deployment bag with practiced efficiency. Flight suit, boots, helmet, bag, personal gear. Everything she owned fit in 2 duffel bags, a life pared down to essentials. She'd sold most of her possessions during the dark months after her resignation, and she hadn't accumulated much since. Material things seemed less important now. What mattered was the mission, the aircraft, the squadron, the family she'd found again. The Theodore Roosevelt sat at Pier 12 like a floating city, its flight deck stretching over 1,000 feet of angled steel. Vera walked up the brow with her squadron mates, feeling the weight of history and purpose settle on her shoulders. She'd deployed twice before, but this felt different. This was a second chance, a resurrection, a middle finger to everyone who'd tried to bury her career. She was 41 years old, standing on the deck of a nuclear-powered supercarrier, about to sail into a combat zone. Some women her age were worried about retirement plans. Vera was worried about missile lock tones and electronic warfare tactics. She wouldn't have it any other way. The deployment's first months were routine flight operations, maintenance, training, the grinding rhythm of carrier life. Vera flew combat air patrols, escort missions, shows of force. She proved herself again and again, to her squadron, to the air wing, to herself. The younger pilots began seeking her advice, asking questions about tactics and situational awareness. She became what she'd always been destined to be. Not just a pilot, but a teacher, a mentor, someone whose experience could keep others alive. Then came the night that changed everything again. The mission brief was straightforward: provide close air support for a coalition raid targeting a high-value terrorist cell operating near the Iraq-Syria border. 2 FA-18E Super Hornets from VFA-147 would maintain station overhead, while ground forces executed the raid. Standard CAS profile, low risk, probably wouldn't even need to employ weapons. Vera drew the mission with Deuce as her wingman. They launched into a moonless night. The carriers deck a strip of light against infinite darkness, and climbed to their holding pattern at Angels 25. The ground force was Callsign Wolfpack, a SEAL team inserted via helicopter, moving on foot to the target compound. Vera monitored their radio traffic, listened to the controlled professionalism of men moving through deadly terrain, and felt the familiar tightness in her chest that always came before combat. She'd been here before. She knew how quickly routine became catastrophic. Reaper, Wolfpack Actual. We're 300 meters from objective. Request positive ID on thermal contacts bearing 090 from our position. Vera checked her targeting pod, painting the area with invisible infrared. She saw heat signatures, several moving, others stationary. The compound itself glowed with the residual warmth of generators and recent human activity. Wolfpack Reaper, count 12 thermal contacts within the compound. 3 roving patrols outside the perimeter. Your approach vector is clear. Copy Reaper, moving to breach in 2 mics. Beside her, 30,000 feet and 10 miles away, Deuce maintained perfect formation. The kid had grown up a lot in the last 6 months. He flew with confidence now, but also caution, the ideal combination. Vera trusted him at her wing, which wasn't something she could say about many pilots. The raid began. Radio traffic intensified, controlled bursts of information, tactical updates, the verbal shorthand of special operations. Vera kept her eyes on the targeting pod display, watching heat signatures move through the compound, tracking threats, ready to intervene if things went sideways. Which, of course, they did. Contact, contact. We're taking fire from multiple positions. Wolfpack is pinned down. The professional calm evaporated from the ground commander's voice, replaced by the controlled urgency of someone in immediate danger. Vera's hands moved on instinct, inputting targeting data, preparing weapons systems. Wolfpack Reaper, say position and type of fire. We're in the courtyard, taking PKM fire from second-story windows and the north wall. Unknown number of hostiles. Request immediate close air support. Vera was already rolling in, pushing the nose down, converting altitude into attack position. Her fingers danced across the weapons panel, selecting a GBU-12 laser-guided bomb. Too much ordnance for danger-close work, but she'd employ it on the north wall position first, create some breathing room for the ground force. Wolfpack, Reaper and hot from the south. Mark your position with IR strobe. Marking now. A tiny pinprick of infrared light appeared in her display, the SEAL team's position marked by a strobe visible only through her night vision equipment. They were clustered in a courtyard, effectively surrounded. The hostiles were close, too close. Standard CAS doctrine said maintain 500 meters separation from friendlies when employing 500-pound bombs, but Wolfpack didn't have 500 meters. They had maybe 75, and that was shrinking by the second. Deuce Reaper, hold high and cover our egress. I'm going in alone. Reaper, that's danger close. You sure about this? No, she wasn't sure. Every instinct screamed that this was the same scenario that had ended her career the first time. A ground force in trouble, ordnance that might be too close, a decision that could save lives or end them or both. But this time was different. This time there was no captain telling her to abort. This time the decision was hers alone. I'm sure, hold position. She dove, the Super Hornet accelerating toward terminal velocity, the targeting reticle centering on the north wall position that Wolfpack had called out. 75 meters from friendlies. Danger close didn't begin to describe it. This was threading a needle at 500 knots in the dark while people died below. Her hand moved to the pickle button, hesitated. One wrong calculation, one small error in targeting, and she'd kill the men she was trying to save. The words came back to her, Kincaid's voice in memory. You disobeyed my order because my order was wrong. Sometimes the textbook answer wasn't the right answer. Sometimes you had to trust your training, your instinct, and the God-given situational awareness that separated competent pilots from great ones. She pickled the bomb. It fell away into darkness, laser guidance fins adjusting microcorrections based on her targeting pod's invisible designation. 5 seconds of flight time. 4, 3. Vera pulled hard, G-forces crushing her into the seat, the aircraft groaning as she traded speed for altitude, getting clear of the blast radius. 2, 1. The north wall erupted in a flower of orange fire. The explosion was massive, catastrophic, perfect. The hostile position ceased to exist, replaced by rubble and smoke and the silence of effective violence. Vera leveled out, banking hard to assess. Holy shit, Reaper, direct hit. Hostiles are down, we're moving to extract. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by the tactical calculation of next steps. The compound was compromised, the element of surprise gone, enemy reinforcements could arrive any moment. Wolfpack needed to get out and they needed air cover to do it. Wolfpack Reaper, be advised you've got vehicular traffic inbound from the east. Count 3 technicals, approximately 2 clicks out and closing fast. Copy Reaper, we're extracting with 1 precious cargo. Request you keep those technicals off our backs. Precious cargo, they'd captured a high-value target. That changed the stakes. This wasn't just about getting out alive. It was about getting out with intelligence that could save future lives. Vera armed her remaining weapons, another GBU-12, 2 AIM-120 AMRAAMs for air threats, and 500 rounds of 20 cannon ammunition for close work. The technicals were armed pickup trucks, probably mounting heavy machine guns or even light anti-aircraft weapons. Dangerous to helicopters, annoying to jets, but vulnerable if engaged properly. She rolled inverted, pulled the nose through to point at the desert floor, and accelerated into another attack run. The technicals appeared on her targeting pod, 3 vehicles moving fast across open terrain, kicking up dust trails visible even in infrared. They were racing toward the compound, trying to cut off Wolfpack's escape route. She selected guns, preferring to save her remaining bomb for any harder targets that emerged, and set up a strafing run. At 1 mile she opened fire. The M61A2 Vulcan cannon roared to life, spitting 20mm high-explosive incendiary rounds at 6,000 rounds per minute. The tracers looked like a laser in the darkness, a burning line connecting her aircraft to the lead technical. She walked her fire across the target, saw the truck explode as rounds found the fuel tank, corrected for windage, and transitioned to the second vehicle. 12 seconds of firing, 300 rounds expended. 2 technicals destroyed. The third veered off, driver either smart enough to retreat or too dead to drive straight. Reaper Wolfpack, that's some damn fine shooting. We're at the extract point. Helos are inbound. Copy Wolfpack. We'll cover until you're airborne. The next 15 minutes were an eternity of circling, watching, waiting for threats that never materialized. The extraction helicopters arrived, loaded Wolfpack and their prisoner, and departed into the night. Mission complete. Lives saved. Intelligence gathered. All in a night's work. Except as Vera and Deuce returned to the carrier, trapped in their aircraft with too much adrenaline and too many thoughts, she realized this mission had been more than routine. She'd faced the same decision that had cost her career 3 years ago, and this time she'd made the same choice with a different outcome. Not because the tactics had changed, but because this time no one had tried to stop her. This time her competence had been trusted. This time the system had worked the way it was supposed to. They trapped aboard the Roosevelt just before dawn, Vera catching the 3-wire with